We are so happy seeing you again. Just saying a few words about our presenters. So I will start with Dr. Kristina Hansson. She is an associate professor at Lund University, specializes in language development in children with developmental language disorder and hearing impairment. She has led research in groups like communication and cognition, the Laminate, which is about language acquisition, multilingualism, and teaching, and the recent group, which is funded by Bank of Sweden in 2024, called Team. It's about transdisciplinary approaches to learning, acquisition, and multilingualism. And as a project coordinator, Professor Hansson, sorry for that, she is the coordinator of the group word definition skills, and she investigates cognitive and linguistic mechanism in word learning, and of course in defining words. She has numerous publications, and her work enhances understanding and intervention strategies for language impairments. And about Dr. Emily Grenner, she's a lecturer at Lund University. She examines language development and communication disorders. Her dissertation explored how observational learning improves narrative writing in elementary students, including those with hearing loss. She also contributes to the research group Team, studying factors in children's word definition skills. Her work enhances language acquisition and writing intervention for children with language disorders. Last but not least, Dr. Ida Rosqvist. She is a speech language pathologist and lecturer at Lund University. She studies vocabulary development and the impact of teacher training on language abilities. As a member of the team group also, she studies word definition skills and how they improved and be improved through intervention, and how they can support children's language development. So their today presentation has the title Word Definition Skills Explaining Variability, the complex interaction between factors within and around the child. We are very happy having you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So we'll start by sharing our presentation.
Och nu har vi nog, nu är det fel tror jag. No, it's...
Is that okay? You can see the pictures?
Yes, we can see the first slide, yes.
Yeah, good. So thank you for inviting us to speak about what's closest, at least to my heart right now. And thank you for that very nice introduction. So as Ifigenia said, we are from Lund University in the very, very south of Sweden. It's one of Sweden's oldest and biggest university from 1666. And this is what the main building looks like. And we are speech and language pathologists, all three of us. We think it might be called logotherapeutis in Greece.
Exactly.
Yeah, good. And we all have focused our research on children with developmental language disorder, that is, children who have difficulties learning language in comparison with peers in spite of normal hearing and otherwise typical development. And one of the aspects of language in children with DLD, that's the acronym for developmental language disorder, that we have been focusing on in at least in earlier projects, and also specifically in our current project that we are in the process of starting, is lexical semantic skills and in particular word definition skills. So we will tell you something about the results from the earlier projects, and then we will describe the project that we are about to start. But first, this is our group of colleagues that have been involved in research on word definition skills from our department. And they're all Swedish speech language therapists from our department. So now I will give the floor to Emily, who will tell you about the word definition task, why it's important. So
I'll just make a little adjustment here. Yes, so I'd like to talk a little bit about why we want to explore word definitions and why that is a useful task in assessing language skills. So here is a quote about definitions of terms, not only word definitions, of course, but the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. I'm sure you're familiar with this before. And first of all, what is a word definition task? It's often when a person is asked what a word means, and then gives either an oral response or a written response. We work with oral responses. So what is an X, or what is X? And the person answers that it is or it means. Benelli stated in 1988 that it is to explain what something is to somebody who doesn't know it. So, for example, what does bus mean, or what is a bus? And the person will say something about the bus. This develops over time, and begins with small descriptions and then becomes more formal over time. And so before school age, children usually use descriptions of objects and has structures. For example, a dog has, what is a dog? A dog has 4 legs, and it will develop over time to something like a description that it is something with a superordinate term and with the defining features. So the X is a Y that's Z. So a bus is for example, a vehicle that will be used for transporting many people at once. Yes. Yes, I think I was talking a little bit before the picture, so please butt in if I have missed something here. Word definition is it is a metalinguistic task, and you will use decontextualized language over time. And you can use it to assess both vocabulary depth, so how much a person knows about the word, but also, thank you, but also the metalinguistic ability to form a correct definition and a conventional definition. And there are many pragmatic skills involved. That is, you have to know something about what the listener needs to know about this definition, so that he or she will be able to understand what you mean. In a school context, many of the school subjects are concerned with defining terms and defining the school subjects' terms. In taking tests, for example, teachers will expect kids to define the words that they're something that they're learning about. So what does democracy mean, for example? And when they want to learn, they want to learn from the teacher's definitions and from textbooks and dictionaries and so on. And asking about a word, then they will also be given definitions and have to understand what definitions, how they are built. And when they report their academic knowledge, what they have to describe what is a molecule, for example. Yes, let me see how let's go. Let me see. That's a short pause just now. Sorry about that. And you have to, and you're expected to clarify concepts, and it's also a way of preventing misunderstandings and repairing misunderstandings, so that you have to define what I mean when I say this word is this and that. And that can be used both in a school context and, of course, well, between friends and so on. Sorry about this. I'm sorry about the pause here.
It's a Zoom window getting in the way of
all.
We want to see you, but we also want to see what picture we're talking about. Yeah. Technical issues with online presentations.
No worries.
So what would influence a word definition? Well, a word definition skill, and of course it has something to do about word characteristics. So what kind of a word is it? And that has been studied. Well, you see that there's a long line of references here, and how frequent the word is also has something to do about how well you're expected to describe a word and to define a word, and also the level of abstraction or imageability is also an important factor. So something that you can clearly see in your mind would be easier to define than something more abstract. Let me see. And also living versus non-living things has been described as well, that you will define living things in a different way than inanimate or non-living things. Of course, age will be one important factor that you will both with general linguistic ability and language ability, and also with schooling, you will develop your word definition skills, and so both age and educational level. And we don't yet really know about what general cognitive ability has. Well, how much that will explain your word definition skills. And executive functions has also been showed, for example, by Ifigenia and and Zoe, that having the ability to sort of decide what will I need to describe to make a very concise definition. And socioeconomic factors is also one factor that could, or a set of factors that can influence word definition skills, and gender is also one of those factors. And there are studies on word definition skills in bilingual participants. Let me see. And we have, there are several earlier works studying, comparing bilinguals and monolinguals, and also possible cross-language transfer skills from one language to another. And will you please help me just saying something about these studies, Ida?
Okay, so yeah, we won't go into detail to the actual results in these studies, but these are some of the areas that have been studied before in terms of bilingual participants. But there aren't that many studies, as you can see, and you can see the names. We have a brilliant team, our Greek colleagues, because this is understudied in general, as there are so many things we still don't know about this. But we have looked comparing monolinguals and bilinguals and some studies on cross-language transfer.
And something that is sort of that we can see in many different language tests is that bilingual persons will often have, a lower than expected result on many tests that are developed for monolingual persons. And that is not because of a poorer language grasp, but probably because of, task-related factors. So we want to be able to study more about the, different, how many languages you speak and to what extent. Yes, language proficiency in general and word definition performance, as we were talking about before, and also the relationships between school exposure and what language you're instructed in and word definition performance. Also schooling in a foreign language, not the language that you would speak at home. Yes. Here, monolingual participants will outperform bilingual participants on word definition tasks. But it's probably due to several factors, and we want to know some a lot more about this and how these things what will affect what. And with increasing age, some bilinguals may catch up with monolingual peers on some aspects, but not perhaps all. And we also know that there's a relationship to school exposure, and it may be that your word definition skills will actually be better than in your second language, that is the school language, than in your first language, because it's not a task that you would do as much in your home setting. Yes. And now Ida will talk about, we have 3 earlier studies to present, and Ida will be presenting the first of these here. So please.
All right, so thank you. So we're going to be talking a bit about what we have done previously in our one of the groups that was on the picture at front. So I will be talking a bit about one study where we investigated monolingual and bilingual students' word definitions of 10 cross-curricular words. And then we have an exploratory study, so this is unpublished data, but we will look at a little bit about word definition skills in children that has a history of speech language pathology contact. That is us, I can't say the word in Greek, so I'm sorry, I will try to remember it, but the logopedics. And then we also have a study that looks at the effect of a teacher continuing professional development program, that is a teacher training program, and the results, the effect on their students' word definition skills. So I will talk you through these studies. So the first one has been published already a few years ago. And in this study, we had 208 students, and they are in grade 1 and 2, which in Sweden means that they are 7-8 years old. So you start grade 1 the fall when you turn 7 years old in Sweden. So the absolute earliest grades. And about half of the participants were bilingual, and they had, I think it was about 15 different languages spoken in this sample. So in Sweden, we have a diverse language background in our schools, but the most common language spoken in Swedish schools today is Arabic, except for Swedish. So that is the biggest language, and that is also the biggest language in our sample. And then we had we had Vietnamese, we had Danish, we had Albanian. So we had a heterogeneous group in this sample, lots of different languages spoken. And we collected these samples in 2 what we call municipalities. So that's an area around a city in the southern part of Sweden. And one of those, they have, in general, low level of parental education and many bilinguals. So that is common for the whole municipality and also common for these schools where we collect the data. And then we had another municipality where it's actually the reversed situation. So in general, we have really high level of parental education and few bilinguals. So one might ask, like, why would we choose 2 very different situations? They're hard to compare, yes, but this is the reality in Sweden. We actually have a really high segregation in our school system. So we have a lot of schools with many bilinguals or multilinguals, and what is also typically is that we have a lower level of parental education in those schools and higher level of parental education in those schools with more monolinguals. So this reflects the reality of Sweden today. And in this study, we used a word definition task where we asked, what does the word mean? And we had 10 different words. So we had jump, play, headline, which is, headline doesn't really translate. In Sweden, it's a more broad term and something that is used earlier in the school system. And then we had choose, task, tell, together, ponder, difference, and adults. So we had some nouns, some verbs. We had both abstract and concrete, but what we wanted to actually capture was words that we expect the kids to hear in the school system or in the everyday language of the teachers. And we don't have a corpus. One could think that we should look at a corpus for what is most commonly used, but as these are kids who are not reading and writing, they are most exposed to oral language, and we don't have a corpus of oral language. So we don't know if they have heard these words at school, but based on our experience, this is probably words that they have heard at school at several points in time. And the kids gave an oral response to this question. And then you can grade or you can interpret word definitions in many different ways. We chose a system that has a combination of both form and content, which is something we would gladly discuss later, and we have chosen a different way for our new project. But let's look at the scoring system that we have used in the past. Okay, so this is based on MacGregor and colleagues. It's a 4-point scoring scale, where 0 points would be either an inaccurate definition or no answer at all. So for example, if you have the word adult, someone said that you are a teacher, that you work with children. All right, so all teachers are adults, but not all adults are teachers. So this is an inaccurate definition. Adult doesn't mean teacher. Those are not synonyms. That's why this means 0 points for this answer. 1 point would be at least partially correct, but not a conventional definition. So, for example, that you are big. If you are big, then you can go by yourself or walk by yourself. So that is the typical, the small child's perception of what it is being adult has to do with size and something about what you can do when you're adult, but it doesn't really clearly define the term adult, right? And then we have for 2 points, that is correct and conventional, but minimal definition. So for example, adult, it means when a human is big and it has like 18 years. Okay, so we have human, that is like the superordinate term, and the key defining entity is that you're big and you have 18 years. So that is, I think that's a really impressive definition from a child of that age. And then for 3 points, that would be correct, conventional, but also well elaborated. So for example, you're over 18 years and maybe you move away from home and you have to pay your taxes by yourself. You have more responsibilities. So this is not an Aristotelian definition. It's not how we scored it. We scored it based on amount of information included. But this child has a understanding of the actual abstract word, being an adult, that you pay taxes, you have responsibilities, what comes with that. It's not about just size or age, it has more to it, that word. So as you can see, we have a large variation from the inaccurate understanding of this term to this very well elaborated understanding and expression. And these are all, they're in grade 1 and 2, so they're separated by 1 year, but they're still 7, 8 years old. So in age, it's not too much of a difference, but we see a big variety in how competent they are. Let's look at one more example. So the word difference. We had some children giving an answer, something like the things that are the same. It'd be likadana in Swedish. So this is obviously a big problem. If you go to school and we talk about differences in math, in biology, we talk about differences in many, in Swedish curriculum, we talk about similarities and differences in many different subjects. And if you think that difference means that it's the same, then you're going to have a problem at school. So this was actually someone thinking the antonym, the opposite. 1 point for difference would be, it can mean black and white. Black is much darker than white, so that's an example. And for 2 points, it means that they're dissimilar. And this is one of those that doesn't really translate to English because olika, it's a synonym in Swedish that is pretty common for kids. Dissimilar is not really common for kids in English. So this is one of those examples in Swedish that's kind of hard to translate. But this is using a synonym for this definition. And then for 3 points in difference, that is dissimilar. There's a difference between my hand and my other hand because the other is bigger and the other is smaller. So it has a synonym and also an example. So you can see that this child has a more elaborated knowledge about this word. Okay, so what we did then is that we compared the bilinguals or multilinguals speaking 2 or more languages at home or in their everyday life with the monolinguals who are all Swedish speaking. And what we could see in general, in like many of the children, it was a hard task for them, and many children struggled with this. But we could see that the bilingual group, they had lower performance on word knowledge, that is how many of the words they had some sort of basic level understanding, and they also had less elaborated word definitions. So this is on group level. So we see that monolinguals outperform the bilinguals. And we wanted to look at if the answer patterns are the same or different between the groups. So when looking at those words that gave where the kids got 0 points, that is, they couldn't give some small example. They either had incorrect definitions or they didn't say anything at all. And comparing these two graphs, you can see that the pattern is somewhat similar, with the word headline being the hardest word for all kids, regardless if they're monolingual and bilingual. So this was obviously a word that was too hard for them. Most of them said, oh, I don't know, I've never heard that word, which to us we think that is odd. In grade 1 and 2, we would expect them to have heard them, but clearly it was not well enough understood. But the patterns look somewhat similar, with the exceptions that the bilinguals all had higher levels of 0 answers. And then looking at the 1 points, that would be an example or something related to the word, but not a conventional definition. Again, we can see that it's a similar pattern between the groups, but the bilinguals have a shallower word knowledge and less elaborated definitions, which we also can see with those the 2s and the 3s that are the actual definitions, either small ones or elaborated ones. So we conclude that we see similar patterns between the groups, but with the monolinguals just being higher at all levels. Like, they know more words and they can give more elaborate definitions of the words. But then we wanted to look at to what extent does background factors explain this variance that we see, that some kids do really well and some have really hard time. So we looked at bilingualism, something we call general language ability. That is a test on a test battery of several language skills that are not vocabulary related. It's grammatical, syntactical, and rehearsing repetition of sentences. So it's not vocabulary test, other language skills. And then we have something called school characteristics, and that is, so the school the kids go to, if they have many or few bilinguals, and what's the level of parental education in that school. And then also on family level, what level of parental education do the children have? So we wanted to look at to what extent do these background factors explain this variance we see in the results. And we did what's called a stepwise hierarchical regression model. And for those of you who are not familiar with that, I will not go into detail what this shows, but it's a statistical model for showing how much of the variance that we see in test results can be explained by those factors that we put into the model. So first we put in bilingualism in isolation. And then it looks like it can explain 15% of the variance. So that is not much, but still we can see a clear explanation. After that, we added level of parental education. And now we can see that bilingualism in itself, how much that factor can explain the variance, decreases. And we get the level of parental education can explain some of these results. But what happens now is that we see something called shared variance. That means that bilingualism and level of parental education, those two factors are actually, they together have some explanation factor. And we can also see this in our sample. So the bilingual kids in general have lower level of parental education. So those factors are correlated in our sample and in Sweden in general. But we still have 81% unexplained, so we don't know what's going on with that. And then we added what's called the school characteristics. So what kind of school do they go to? And now we see that the shared variance is still even bigger. And this means that, so we have the bilingual group in general, the parents have lower levels of parental education, but they also go to school where that is like the general case, where other people have the same background. And the monolinguals, they have higher level of parental education, and they go to those schools where that is the norm. So this is all connected together in our sample. And next we added the language ability test score, so the test battery for that all of the kids did. So it's a test. And now we can see that this factor is what is really explaining a lot of the variance, a third of the variance. So having strong language skills, then you're more likely to have a higher result on the word definition task. And it's not surprising, because giving word definitions is a language intense task. And also, if you have high language skills in one area, you typically have that in others too. But this is where really the language proficiency is what really explains much of the variance. We also tried, we also added nonverbal IQ to this model. And this in itself didn't add anything to the model. It only changed how much is shared variance. So we can kind of disregard that one and go back to this one. Okay, so what we see here, if you remember, for the first model, bilingualism in itself looked as it could explain 15%, but adding more and more background factors, this alone only predicts a half of a percentage of the variance, and this was not even statistically significant anymore. So we interpret this as, we can't say that it's bilingualism in itself, for example, that you have less exposure to Swedish language. That is not what causing this group level difference, but instead we have a lot of factors interacting with each other. What family you come from, what's your home language, what's the level of parental education for your parents, and all those things related to socioeconomic status, and what kind of school you go to. So we see a lot of shared variance. These things interact with each other. And this is something that we want to look at even more in our upcoming project. And then let's talk a little bit about study 2, which is unpublished data. I'm going to hand over the word for Kristina to go through this one.
Yes, for the study that Ida just presented, we had an unselected population. We didn't have any criteria for participation, and among those 205 students, as Ida already said, there was a pretty even distribution of children with Swedish as their first language and Swedish as their second language. And we also, for all students, well, we asked the parents to give us background information. And one of the questions was whether they had had contact with a speech language pathologist before we saw them. About 17% of this group did have a history with speech language pathology contact, whereas 83% did not have this experience. We also asked why they had an SLP contact, and in the majority of cases, the most common reason was that the child had some difficulties related to speech. For example, having trouble pronouncing words, phonological difficulties, or stuttering. Very few parents said that their children had problems with language. So even if they did have an SLP contact, we don't know how many of those children had developmental language disorder. The children were assessed, as Ida already said, for their general language ability with the KELF-4 core language score. We also tested their nonverbal ability with Raven's colored progressive matrices and their word definition abilities. And first of all, we compared the two large groups, children with no SLP contact and children with an SLP contact, on those three measures. And as for nonverbal ability, there was no significant difference between the two groups, which is what we would expect. For general language ability, the group without SLP contact performed significantly higher than the group with SLP contact. And their word definition skills were also significantly better. In spite that among them, probably maybe even a majority didn't really have language problems, only had speech problems.
According to parental report.
Yeah, according to the parental report. We also had some missing data. Not all parents did respond to this survey. Within the SLP group, or the group with SLP contact, 19 had Swedish as their first language and 16 had Swedish as their second language. Thus, the distribution here was also very even. It wasn't that any of the groups had a higher proportion of children with SLP contact. So comparing those two subgroups, it turned out that the group with Swedish as their first language outperformed the group with Swedish as a second language on all three parameters: nonverbal ability, general language ability, and word definition ability. And then further on, we compared within the first language and second language group, we compared the subgroups. And within the group with Swedish as their first language, the group without SLP contact performed significantly better on the language, in their general language skills, but the difference regarding word definition ability was not significant. Within the group with Swedish as a second language, the group without SLP contact outperformed the group with SLP contact on both general language ability and on word definition ability. So these are unpublished data, and it's kind of a pilot study for the project that we will carry out now to show us that there is, it will be interesting to investigate word definition skills in children with developmental language disorder and children with Swedish as their second language. Okay, so Ida will take over again to present the first study.
All right, yes. Okay, so the third study is about our teacher professional developmental program. So this one, I'm just going to talk about this real briefly. But what we did in this project is that we had 6 schools with 25 teachers and 209 of those students. So these are all the same students in these 3 studies. And we did an intervention that lasted 11 weeks, and each session was 90 minutes. It was 16.5 hours altogether of teacher training. And in this teacher training program, we had a lot of different both lectures and assignments and practical ways of how to increase the children's language skills in general in the classroom, but with a lot of focus on vocabulary development. So we had, for example, lectures on vocabulary and vocabulary development. We had some general advice on vocabulary supporting strategies in the classroom. And then we had a lot of different specific strategies to work with in the classroom. I will not go through this in detail, but I will give you the reference later on if you want to read more about it. In this intervention group, we had one called a direct intervention group. So they had an assessment, and then they had intervention, assessment, and then a period of no assessment, and then a follow-up. And then we had the delayed intervention condition who had intervention later on. And then we actually had a teacher dropping out for reasons. So we had one class of kids who their teacher didn't get any intervention at all. So we call this a no intervention. This was not supposed to happen, but things happen in research. And there's some timing, so it's changing. Sorry about that. So when we look at the results on the word definition task, so for the direct intervention group, when the teachers had this teacher training program, their word definition skills were statistically significant increased at post-test. It increased a bit more at follow-up, but that difference wasn't statistically significant. And then we look at the delayed intervention group. So they did not have a statistically significant increase when the teachers did not receive intervention, but they did when they did receive. So that we have a different pattern in this one. And then looking at the no intervention group, they did not have a statistically significant increase, neither from test number 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, and not even on the whole period. The other two intervention groups, they had an increase from before and after, and it was significant during the period where the teacher had teacher training. So we don't have strong enough evidence to conclude that this is actually a clear intervention effect, but we think that this is really interesting and we want to know more, and we want to do more intervention studies and target it even more specifically on word definition skills and how teachers can support that in the classroom. But we think that these are some interesting results that we can build upon on new studies. But that was just a really quick overview of this because it's not really in the topic of today. But if you're interested in this and other things regarding vocabulary development in the school years, and then you can check out my dissertation. You can download it online, a PDF, and I have tried to gather a lot of good references on teacher training and vocabulary development. So if you're interested in those things, you can find it online. But let's look at some conclusions what we can draw based on previous studies, but also these 3 studies that we have done in our previous projects. Okay, so when we think about word definition skills, or we look at children's word definition skills, we have all of these factors like age and schooling and school characteristics, what kind of other kids go to the same school, maybe teacher, what kind of competency the teachers have, their training, and also socioeconomic factors on family level and group level and society level. Also language skills and bilingualism connected to language proficiency. And also the whole thing about what kind of items we choose when we do this task and how do we score it. So we have all of these factors, and we know that something is going on with some of them. There is some sort of interaction, but actually there's so many things that we still don't know about this interaction on individual, family, school, community level, and also with the linguistic properties of the words we use and how we score them. So there's still many things that we don't know when it comes to word definition skills. All right, so time for Kristina to see now what.
Yes, with with this as an experience, we were very lucky to be invited to take part in an application for a research program, which is called Transdisciplinary Approaches to Learning, Acquisition, and Multilingualism. And we have this program consists of 7 different projects. 6 of them are running now, and we chose as our topic to work more on word definition skills because our research questions for that are very similar to the research questions for this whole program. The program is built, in particular, the transdisciplinary approach is built on a model by the Douglas Fir group, where you you take into account all the different levels, the individual level, the micro level, the meso level, the macro level. All those levels are probably important and contribute to variation in language learning. So these are the larger research questions for the program. So how do we characterize the interaction between linguistic, cognitive, neurological, and social variables? Within the program, there are researchers from different areas, from linguistics, from psychology, from from pedagogic subjects. And what is the interplay between individual and social levels of context? And what we want to try and catch is the dynamic and reciprocal influence of language development, cognitive change, and social cognitions. So this is a general picture of how you can visualize this, that there are those wheels that all go together from different areas. So Emily will tell you about the purpose and aim of our project.
Yes. So now we had the opportunity to build on these earlier studies and within this framework. And our purpose is to examine how within individual skills, cognitive and linguistic skills, and also external factors are associated with word definition skills. And we want to contribute to understanding of variation and variability. And these are our research questions. We want to look at how executive function skills, inhibition and updating are associated with word definition skills. Theory of mind, we believe that theory of mind will also have be an important factor, and we want to measure that with a referential communication task. We will look at how our lexical and grammatical skills associated with word definition, and further, how will socioeconomic characteristics and the exposure to Swedish be associated with word definition skills, and development from school year 2, so age 7 to 9, to age year 2 to age 4, so children with between 7 and 11 years old approximately. And we want to look at the semantic properties of the words that will be defined. And also look at form and content and differences in assessment of these. So the kind of definitions that you make. And I think I will do a little bit, I'll not talk too much about everything here, but we will use, our participants will be children with both typical language development and children with developmental language disorder, since we know that is a interesting thing to look at, and we want to be able to support children with difficulties in their language development in school. And we will look at Swedish as a first language or as a second language, and these grades, as I said before, and areas with different socioeconomic characteristics. We will ask caregivers for background information about their language and education, about the language use in the family, which languages you use, and the child's language background. So how much time they have spent in Swedish preschool, if they had an SLP contact, speech language pathology contact, if there were any concerns about language development, and also heredity for language related difficulties, and hearing and vision or sight. We will meet these children for about an hour. We hope will be enough for quite a few tasks, and they will concern language skills, executive function, so inhibition and updating tasks, and I think the theory of mind task, as I said, and for the language skills we will look at phonological processing, measuring non-word repetition. So we will ask the children to repeat a nonsense word, and that says something about the ability to learn a completely new word, and that is associated with many language skills, and it is usually it's a difficulty for children with developmental language disorder. We will look at vocabulary skills in different ways, so expressive vocabulary, verbal fluency, so the ability to say many items of clothing, for example, or many different kinds of animals. Word association, so if you would use if you hear the word red, what is the first thing you will come to think about? And also hypernyms, being able to produce a hypernym, and we'll come back to that in a little while. That is a task that we're developing, and Ida is illustrating. And also formulation of sentences. So a child will get a picture and a word, and they'll have to formulate a sentence containing that word. I think maybe I should just, since the time is, I think we'll just skip forward toward the hypernym task, because that's the most interesting, I think. If you want
to know more about the other tasks, you can ask
Yes,
afterwards.
and also, and the flankerfish task, for example, and these are well studied before. Maybe you will recognize some of these. And I said something about phonological processing before, and the vocabulary test, expressive vocabulary and word association. And in this formulation of sentences, the child will will look at a picture, and they'll get to know that please form a sentence containing the word children, or the word or in this case. So here they have some they get to choose the sentence quite well within some within this picture. And this is the hypernym task that we have 25 items.
Yes, all right. Yes, so when we give a formal definition, we use a hypernym or superordinate. So what we want to see is that can the children, if they use one in their definitions, can they also say, or actually the other way around, if they can name a hypernym in a specific hypernym task, will they also use it in a word definition where it would be expected? So we're constructing this task from scratch. We don't have one of these in Swedish before. So we have about 25 items that we're currently working on. So we're going to have a practice item. So, okay, so in this picture, you see toys. We would call these toys. And then a practice item. So what are these words called? They are called, we expect them to say clothes. And then we're going to have 25 items, for example, furniture, instruments, rodents, and tools. So we're going to have different hypernyms or categories that are, some of them will be very expected to know of the children of this age. And then we also have the more advanced ones, for example, rodents, like typical animal within the animal kingdom. This is something we're going to start piloting when we're piloting the whole task, but it hasn't been done before. So in the question and discussion times, if someone has experience, we would love to discuss this furthermore. But this will be a naming task, so they will see the pictures and they will orally name them or not. And then we have the main task, which of course is the word definition task, and it's going to be a production task only, so they're going to give oral definitions. And we have been thinking about back and forward of different word choice considerations that we could look at. And we're also thinking about how do we present this, and we ended up that they should explain the word to a toy or a child who doesn't know the meaning. So that would be the setting for this task. And we're going to do the form and content scoring separately rather than the combined composite score that we use in the other studies. And what we ended up with is 12 items, and we decided to go with a distinction between living things and artifacts based on previous studies looking at living things are usually more often defined or described with perceptual features, how they look, and artifacts more in terms of functional feature, what you do with them, how you use them. So we have from the categories plants or berries and vegetables, and we have animals. It's an insect, one reptile, and one rodent. So in the hypernym task, we also have reptiles and insects and rodents. That we want to see if the kids will say those hypernyms in that task. And tools, cutlery or utensils, and means of transportation, different items. And this is ongoing work, and we will start piloting in a very short time, we hope, preferably in a few weeks' time. All right, so we have something else going on in our group, which Emily's going to tell you about.
Yes, this is, well, leading up to this, well, to the experiments that to the data collection that we'll be piloting soon. We've also tried to look at all different studies on word definitions that we've been able to find before. So we're making a scoping review of those studies. So and I'm not, well, you may be familiar with a scoping review. There are many different kinds of reviews, of course, and this is a protocol where you try to map out, well, what evidence there is before, and we want to look at how scoring has been done and in what contexts have word definition tasks been collected and so on. And this protocol for the scoping review has been pre-published, so that we'll be able to to go back to that. But so that's once we get piloting, this scoping review will be on the back burner for a while. But but if you're interested in looking at that, there is a link from the team web page. So this is what Kristina was talking about before, the transdisciplinary approaches to learning acquisition and multilingualism. And here you'll find links to our projects and the other projects within team, and to the conference where we welcomed Ifigenia before. And here's also there's also a seminar series within Laminate and Team, so which you can look into if you're interested. And now it's time for
Thank you.
Yes, for questions and
Thank
and
you so
discussion.
much. Thank you so much. So before giving the floor to the questions, I want to introduce you also Krista Duru, our colleague, because unfortunately she couldn't be there in Lund. So
Yeah.
yeah, Krista, you can say a few words.
Hello, good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I'm very happy to meet you all both online. I would like to congratulate you for your very interesting lecture and your project on word definitions.
Thank you. Your references have been
So
a great
valuable.
inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Krista. So time for questions, comments. Zoe? Yes. Okay, yeah. The
yeah,
technical things. Okay.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we
Now
can.
we can hear you.
So thanks very much for this very interesting and inspiring presentation, all the data you shared with us. We took a lot of ideas from what you did. We are particularly interested in this final, research you showed us about the hypernyms. We haven't tested that, so please, let's collaborate on that project. But on the other hand, I would like to ask you about the grading categories you had, especially in the first research you presented. So I was wondering, how would you grade an answer which would be a synonym, a word synonym, or an example? Because I didn't see that in your grading system. So how would you deal with that?
Yeah. So typically, an example would be 1 point. So something associated with it, but not a definition. A synonym actually was 2 points. So we have talked about this scoring system a lot afterwards, and we have chosen another approach for the upcoming project. But as it turned out, for example, difference has a really easy, accessible synonym. Dissimilar, and also ponder, to think. Those are like easy, accessible synonyms. So when scoring, we figured out that it captured some interesting variation. You can really see that it goes from the incorrect to the elaborated. So it captures this, and we think it's interesting data. But for the new project, we have decided to go form and content separately.
Okay, I see.
And also, the other project, we had many other tests. So it was also we had a lot of data. So we had more than 200 children, and we saw them 3 times each, and a test battery of 1 hour. So we also had to do,
Yeah. Okay, I have one more question. Actually, in the hypernym test, I've seen that you had only nouns, concrete nouns, of course. Do you think it would be possible also to test verbs, general categories like actions, games, or I don't know? Or you think it's difficult for children to really understand this idea?
Yeah. It is. We have talked about words, and I mean, we all know it's really hard to have the hypernyms in a word definition of a verb. It would be very interesting. We have talked about few ones, but yeah, actions. We can't really find any good examples. That's
It could
Yeah.
be, well,
Yeah.
yeah, I think so. And I think it's more difficult for children. For
Yes.
adults, probably it could work, but for children,
Okay.
it's abstract.
Yeah, thank you.
So,
Yeah, and we
yeah.
don't organize the verbs in the same way in our lexicon, so
Of
it's
course.
even
Categorization is cultural, I know.
yeah, that too. So that's
So
Okay,
probably, I
thank
mean, you would have to think about it. Maybe it could be done in another way, and maybe we're so fixed
Yeah.
with the way we categorize nouns. Maybe you should do something else with verbs.
And also, if you have bilinguals, maybe you will find a problem because they will categorize differently. You will consider it
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So there
false, but maybe in their system of categorization will be correct.
Can
Yeah,
still
of
be
course.
logical.
I haven't thought about that.
Yeah, it could be that there would be one odd one out, so to speak.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, so we're really excited about seeing the results because we don't know what to expect because we don't have any previous studies and no previous. So we were thinking this is a first step, and hopefully we will get more funding and do more projects on this. We have one Swedish study who have done a similar hypernym task, but it was only orally. So they would say 4 words, and the kids were also older. And we have talked with those researchers, and we have used some of those categories. But some didn't work in pictures because they're not imaginable. But we ended up doing the picture-based task in order to minimize other problems like working memory issues.
yeah, but it's a first step. It would be very interesting to look at different language categories. Yeah, word categories.
But still, it's a task you do with children all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we have also some of the categories we have used from the Swedish curriculum. So this is what they do in these grades. They talk about, for example, countries, and they talk about, some of the countries, some of the categories are used in school in these grades that we're going to look at. But it's definitely culturally, so it would be very interesting to do it in Greece and see if we have the same results.
I also forgot to say that I found very interesting this idea of professional development. Indeed, professors, teachers, educators in general need that because sometimes they can't really catch the meaning of that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Was there a question in the chat? Or?
I think it's more like she says that she has you provided valuable insight, so it's like a comment.
Thank you.
Yeah,
we
hope so. Yeah, and also maybe that we can have better tools to assess vocabulary skills that we have now, because now there is such a focus on the number of words that children know, not how much they know about each word.
Any other comments or questions? I was wondering a bit, I don't know if Vicky wants to say something more. Vicky?
Yes, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm a teacher in a kindergarten. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I would ask you, based on your findings, it's a practical question. What strategies would you recommend for educators or speech therapists to better support children struggling with word definitions?
Yes. Okay, so I have summarized some of the research on that area in my dissertation, but I mean, the preschool teachers and the teachers, you do so much important work for the children in developing their language in many ways. I typically find that a good way to do with smaller children is one of those description activities. So I really like when I used to work as a school-based speech language pathologist. So we have all of these different objects and do this game. So I'm thinking about a fruit that is orange and round, and it's sweet and juicy when you eat it. So do it as a game, but you actually provide a formal definition and do many of those. So I'm thinking about, can you guess what I'm thinking about? It's an animal. It has 4 legs and a tail, and you can ride it. I think that one was really helpful when I worked with children with developmental language disorder, but you have to do so many, but provide those examples in a playful format. And then also with the categorization and like sorting pictures and toys and naming the categories, also very important. I think those are my 2 go-to activities for working with these. And I also, I do it a lot at home with my own children. It's really fun to see their development if you do it a lot over time. So even children with and without difficulties can really benefit from that. Thinking about exercise, I think. And then, of course, reading. I mean, reading, we all know the importance of reading and talking and having structured conversations and using language in many ways.
And of course, giving many examples of if you notice that somebody has a difficulty, that you'd provide many examples of that word and in different contexts well, so as a general
talking about word definitions in a systematic way, not just because something happens. Be more systematic about it, I think.
And that is also what's so fun about word definition, is that it's a metalinguistic. So we talk about our language, and that's a really fun thing to do and also very important for school success. So talking about what different words mean and how we use them and how we use them in different contexts and actually do that explicitly, very beneficial and also fun activity for kids.
How old are the children that you work with? You said kindergarten, but I realized that it could be
4 to
6. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a perfect age for starting, describing the has structure. So it has 4 legs, it has and then give the next. So the next one will be having a formal definition. So great age to start.
I know. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else to ask or any comments? I was wondering about the definitions you showed us, study 1, whether 2 or 3 were coming from the municipality B that you mentioned or not. Do you remember?
Both.
Both.
They're all from both. So
Yeah.
it's about half. About half. Yeah.
Okay. So
we see a lot of heterogeneity in all, in terms of their background, socioeconomic status, what kind of schools they go to. But what's really striking is that it's very segregated. The schools are very segregated.
Okay.
And that's unfortunately the situation in Sweden today.
Yes, that's an issue. And if I may, another question about the second study. You mentioned about the SLP group, that they had the differences in nonverbal ability, nonverbal intelligence, intelligence, right? Yes. So how, is it something that you expected, or how do you explain these differences?
Yes, well, actually, it is kind of expected because it is a test issue. So the problem with that test, the Raven's color matrices, we say it's non-verbal, but it is a really culturally biased test, and you have to be able to understand the test situation and the instructions. And if you have like really low, some of the children we met, they had really low language skills in Swedish. So it has, some may fail because they don't understand the task and the instruction. It's culturally biased. It comes from I mean, there's a whole big discussion on nonverbal and verbal testing that is really culturally biased, comes from a monolingual Western society perspective. And if you have a different background, the test results that can't really be trusted, or it says something else.
Yeah, during my PhD, we have observed a similar thing. They were children, typical developing children, not with disorders, but there was a difference if they are Greek English rather than Greek Albanian, because it's sometimes, as you said, also something cultural that they were more used in the English, let's say, more used in problem solving or things like that. Sometimes, as Zoe said before, it's an issue of cultural things as well.
It is.
Great. Anything else? I think
It's getting late. Is it 8 o'clock at
8
your...
o'clock, yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's getting late.
Zoe, in Chicago, is it?
Yes, what time is it in Chicago?
Now it's 12 o'clock here.
Okay.
Much better. So it's okay.
Much better. Okay. So thank you. It was really an inspiring talk. So many things about typical developing, non-typically, and bilingualism, monolingualism as well. So thank you so much once again. Tack.
That's what we wanted to say
to
you.
Thank you so much.
We are happy seeing you and collaborating with you always.
Looking forward to that.
And I hope we'll have the chance to bring you in Greece to have a closer collaboration. And this would be the next project.
Yes. Let's do that. And we welcome you to Lund. If anyone is in Lund, reach out to us. And,
please do. Oh, yes.
And we're always here.
Almost.
We hope. Almost.
Thank you so much. So, until the next colloquium and the last one, which is on 21st of May. See you and have a nice time. Bye.
You too.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.